Okay, let's unpack this. Think about, the food you eat, the water you drink. Behind the scenes, there are all these compounds. Some could be harmful. Today, we're diving into testing for one specific group, carbonates.
Right. Carbamates, they're a big class of pesticides. You see them a lot in agriculture, but other places too. And because they can be toxic, checking for them, their residues in food, water, the environment, it's just critical for public health.
And the tech for doing that checking is Carbamate Testing Technology. That's our focus. We're using a market report here from Cognitive Market Research looking at the global Carbamate Test Technology Market. Our mission really is to dig into this data and see what it tells us about, well, global safety efforts.
Yeah, and right off the bat, the global picture, it shows some pretty significant growth. So the market size back in 2021, it was just under $1.5 billion. $1,488.2 million to be exact. By 2025, it's looking like almost $2 billion. The projection is $1,980 million.
Okay, wow. That's a solid jump in just, what, 4 years?
It is. And the forecast goes further out to 2033. They expect it to hit $3,505.1 million then. That translates to a strong global compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of about 7.4% over that whole period.
Right, 7.4%. So this isn't just some blip. It feels like sustained growth, pointing to something fundamental happening worldwide. What does the report say are the core drivers? Why this, upward trend?
Well, the source really emphasizes the crucial role this tech plays in finding those pesticide residues we talked about. That's just non-negotiable for food safety across the globe. And it's also key for environmental monitoring. So as awareness increases and regulations get tighter everywhere about how much of these things are allowed, well, the demand for good, reliable testing just goes up.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, the market growth is pretty much a direct reflection of that stricter regulatory climate and, more investment in protecting public health.
The need to know what's in our stuff, basically. Food, environment, and to enforce the rules. It seems like that's only getting stronger. And those numbers, 2021 through 2033, they really hammer home that point about sustained global investment, don't they?
Exactly. It's a clear signal of priorities shifting, or at least solidifying internationally.
Okay, so the report gives us the big picture, but it also breaks things down by region. And that's where, it starts to get really interesting seeing the different dynamics. Let's maybe walk through that geographically, starting with North America.
Sure, North America. The report calls it a mature and high-value market. It kicked off at $565.5 million in 2021, projected to hit $730.6 million by 2025. And then looking out to 2033, it's expected to be $1,209.3 million. That's with a regional CGR of 6.5%.
6.5%. And within North America, I'm guessing the U.S. is the main player.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The U.S. holds the biggest share, shows strong, steady growth, kind of mirroring that regional trend. Canada and Mexico, though, they also add quite a bit to the market size and growth there. It really points to, well-established regulations and pretty consistent demand for the safety testing.
Okay, so North America, large, stable, established. How's Europe looking in comparison?
Europe's another major one, also described as mature, high value. Its value was $445 million in 2021, forecasted to rise to $584.1 million in 2025, and it's expected to cross the billion-dollar mark by 2033, reaching $1,009.5 million. Its CAGR is a bit higher, actually 7.1%.
Right, 7.1%. And are there specific countries really pushing that growth in Europe?
The report does call out several key contributors. Germany and the UK, they stand out. Pretty substantial market sizes there, which probably reflects, their strong economies and likely strict regulations. But countries like France, Italy, Russia, Spain, they also have notable market values. Even Luxembourg shows up in the numbers. So what you're seeing is pretty consistent demand across quite a few different economies on the continent.
Okay, so two big established markets, North America and Europe, both growing steadily. Now let's pivot to Asia Pacific, because the report seemed to suggest something. Wow, pretty dynamic happening there.
Yeah, this is really where the report highlights the engine of growth, you could say.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Highlights the engine of growth, you could say. The Asia Pacific market, it jumped from $320.7 million in 2021 to a projected $452.4 million in 2025. And then by 2033, it's expected to more than double that 2025 number, hitting $892 million.
Wow, nearly $900 million.
And crucially, the report points this out as the fastest growing region globally. It's got the highest regional CAGR, coming in at 8.9%.
Fastest growing globally.
Yeah.
That's a big statement. What's fueling that? What's behind that really rapid acceleration in Asia Pacific?
Well, the report mentions countries like China, which, leads the region in just sheer market size, and Australia as key drivers. But the real standout in terms of the rate of growth is India. The source specifically calls out India's individual market growth. It's growing at an impressive 11.1% CAGR.
11.1%.
Yeah, that's the highest country-level growth rate mentioned anywhere in the report. It suggests, maybe a rapid expansion of regulatory enforcement there or growing consumer awareness, perhaps just a boom in the industries that need this kind of testing.
So Asia Pacific isn't just growing fast, it's accelerating faster than anywhere else. Driven by big economies like China and Australia, but with India showing, really explosive growth within that picture. Okay, what about the other regions mentioned? Latin America and the Middle East and Africa.
Yeah, these regions, they represent growth, but more in emerging economies. The market sizes themselves are smaller compared to North America or Europe, naturally. But the report details consistent growth across several countries in Latin America. Think Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Chile. And in the Middle East and Africa, the growth is linked, according to the source, specifically to more environmental monitoring efforts and also growing investment in food safety tech. That's particularly highlighted for the rest of Middle East category, but also countries like Egypt and Turkey show growth.
Right. So if we pull all these regional threads together, North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, LATAM, MEA,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway? What does this whole tapestry tell us about carbonate testing globally?
Well, what's really fascinating is how the data paints this picture of a market that's clearly essential and growing everywhere, but, at different speeds and with different vibes. You've got North America and Europe as these sort of mature, high-value anchors with established needs, steady growth. Then Asia Pacific is clearly the dynamic engine for future growth, really driven by these rapidly developing economies that are tightening up their standards. And then Latin America and EA, they're showing meaningful adoption, too, as safety and environmental concerns rise on their agendas as well.
And the reason we should care, why you listening should care about these numbers and co-GRs, it's not just abstract market analysis, is it? It connects back to something much more real for all of us.
Absolutely. It's this market's growth is kind of a proxy for global action on safety. The fact that, billions are being invested and projected to grow further in this specific testing technology, it directly reflects the world basically saying, okay, we need stricter safety standards for food, for the environment, and we need to enforce them. It tells you that governments, industries, they're putting actual resources into the tools needed to find potential hazards and ultimately protect public health more widely than maybe ever before.
So this seemingly quite niche market, its trajectory is actually a pretty clear signal. It signals that things like regulatory compliance and public health monitoring, especially for substances like carbonates, are becoming real global priorities. And that's driving the innovation and the expansion in the technology we need to actually do it.
Precisely. The market data just underlines how relevant and important this sector is and will continue to be on a global scale.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave you with a thought that stems directly from all this data we've discussed. We're seeing this clear global move towards tighter safety standards, right? And more investment in advanced testing tech, like for carbamates. It's driving huge market growth. But this raises a pretty important question, doesn't it? What are the potential challenges, the implications? For countries, for industries, maybe even for you individually, in trying to balance these escalating demands for really sophisticated testing and safety, with the, let's face it, significant technological complexity and the economic costs that come with implementing it everywhere on a widespread basis. Something to think about as this market keeps on growing. Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever stopped to think about what might be hiding, unseen, in the food you eat?
Things like trace residues.
Exactly. Things like pesticide residues, maybe stuff not removed during processing. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the market for testing tech, specifically for carbamates. We've got an overview report guiding us.
And it's a fascinating area.
So why is digging into this market even, relevant? It seems it really boils down to something fundamental, keeping our food supply safe.
Absolutely. Carbamates are a specific class of insecticides, and testing is vital because these residues can stick around in everyday foods. Think vegetables, fruits, grains.
Things we eat all the time.
Right. And what's really driving this according to the report, is this growing global focus on food safety. Plus, governments are getting much, much stricter.
And the technology is evolving fast too, right?
Exactly. Put all that together, safety concerns, regulations, new tech, and you get this really dynamic market we're looking at.
Okay, let's talk regulations then. You mentioned they're a big driver. The report highlights these maximum residue levels, MRLs,
Strict ones.
which are basically the legal limits for pesticide traces in food. And it sounds like the U.S., the EU, they're seriously ramping up screening to enforce these levels.
They really are, and it's broadening out, too. It's not just about the food anymore.
Yeah, wow.
We're seeing wider environmental laws now.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Just about the food anymore.
Yeah, wow.
We're seeing wider environmental laws now. Think places like China, India, Germany. They're mandating testing beyond just the crops.
So like testing the soil and water.
Exactly. Soil, water, this wider net just boosts the demand for versatile testing tech across the board.
Which brings us nicely to the technology itself. The overview mentions some cool advancements helping meet this demand.
Yeah, there's quite a range. You've got simpler things like colorimetric strips.
Like a litmus test almost?
Yeah.
Gives a visual signal?
Sort of, yeah. Quick visual check, then you move up to more sophisticated biosensor-based tests. They use biological components for pretty rapid detection.
Okay, and then the really high-tech stuff.
Right. Then you have the heavy hitters. Things like HPLC and LC-MSMS systems.
Sounds complex.
They are. Think of them as incredibly sensitive sorting machines. They can pick out specific molecules, like tiny carbamate residues in fruit, and identify them with extreme precision. Very powerful.
But also, I imagine, pretty expensive.
Very expensive and complex to run. That's a key point later.
And it's not just the hardware anymore, is it? The digital side is playing a bigger role.
Oh, absolutely. Integrating digital platforms is becoming a game changer. We're seeing AI-powered testing kits now.
AI and test kits, like where?
Agritech firms, say in India or Australia, are using them. It allows for real-time monitoring right there in the field.
Wow, and helps with compliance.
Totally. It helps digitize those compliance records, makes the whole chain more efficient, more traceable.
Okay, so the tech is impressive, but it can't be all smooth sailing. The report must mention challenges too.
Definitely. And a major one comes back to what you asked about earlier, cost.
It's the high-end systems.
Exactly. Those LC-MSMS machines, they can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a massive barrier for smaller labs, maybe in sub-Saharan Africa or even rural parts of Latin America. Accessibility is a real issue.
Yeah, I can see that. And are there other hurdles?
There's also an awareness gap mentioned. In some farming communities, there might not be a full understanding of, say, safe pesticide use or even the value testing brings.
Value in terms of safety, but also market access, I suppose.
Precisely. And then there's a technical challenge, too. Sometimes it's hard to definitively distinguish carbamates from other similar compounds.
Which could lead to false positives.
Exactly. A test might wrongly flag a sample, causing headaches with exports, customs clearance, things like that. It complicates matters.
So challenges exist. But despite those, are there exciting trends emerging? Where's this market heading?
Yes, definitely. One big trend is the move towards portable, real-time testing kits.
Faster results, on the spot.
Yeah, think getting results in maybe under 10 minutes, right, in the field or at the border. That's huge for small farmers in Southeast Asia, for exporters in Brazil needing quick checks, or, border inspectors in Europe trying to process things quickly.
Makes sense. And for the bigger players?
For larger operations, we're seeing more integration of IoT, Internet of Things, sensors, and AI.
For data analysis.
Right. Data interpretation, cloud monitoring. Big farms in the U.S., China, they're using this not just for records, but for predictive alerts, managing risk proactively.
Interesting. Anything else driving things?
Well, kind of related is the rise of organic farming.
How does that fit in? Organics avoid these pesticides, don't they?
They do, but they still need reliable testing for certification. Producers, maybe in Japan or France, need to prove their products are free from prohibited residues to meet standards and what consumers expect. So testing confirms that organic label.
Okay, got it. So let's pull this all together. The picture from this overview seems to be a market really being pushed forward by regulations, consumer demands for safety, and some pretty cool tech.
Definitely. But it's also wrestling with real issues like cost, technical difficulties, and making sure everyone understands the why behind it all.
It really feels like efficient, accessible testing for compounds like carbamates is becoming well, fundamental.
It's central, yeah. Central to building a global food system that's more sustainable and, importantly, more transparent.
So maybe next time you're choosing your fruits or vegetables, just pause for a second. Think about these unseen technologies, these regulations, and how they're working behind the scenes, directly shaping the food choices right there in front of you.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.